Today, I'm excited to have Max Altschuler. Max is not only a friend, but he's also an operator turned VC, and he has raised over $75 million, and he's backed by over 300 go-to-market leaders from OpenAI, Snowflake, Notion, all of them backing his GTM fund. Max has built companies, scaled them, and sold them, and now he's writing checks to the next generation doing the same thing. He wrote the book on hacking sales, which is literally the Bible on how to scale your sales team. Now he's built Sales Hacker too, and he built that from the ground up into a global brand. He wrote a book and then joined me at Outreach as our VP of marketing. Max has a unique perspective because he's one of the few in VC that has seen both sides. He's grinding it out as an entrepreneur, and now as an investor, he's betting on the next big thing. He knows what works, and when you're trying to scale revenue from day one, he's exactly the kind of guy that you want on your side. And he knows a lot about AI agents, he's investing them, and he's helping them get scaled in sales and in marketing. Max, so great to have you here. Let's go get paid. So being sick helps you take a big step back.
Oh yeah.
And rethink your life.
Yeah.
What will you share with your younger Max?
A lot came out of it. Actually, some really big life changes. So we had kind of built our dream home in Scottsdale, Arizona that had just finished, took like a year and a half to build. And we had just finished that.
That's when Arizona started boiling. That's
that's
when you put a house there.
Exactly. And Arizona is really hot, for multiple meanings, right? A lot of people from the coast are moving there. But we realized, one of the biggest things I realized was I really am just the happiest person when I'm in nature. I'm a better father, partner, friend, and I'm better at my job. I need to be in nature. And, it's funny when we did the acquisition at Outreach, we moved to Seattle, me and Ashley.
Yeah.
And it was just us at the time. We didn't have kids yet. And we're sun people. My wife calls me a salamander.
Dude, I think you moved at the worst time too. It did not stop raining.
We had heard that first snow that we had in 100 years when I was there.
100%, yeah.
Which is a theme for me. When I moved to a new city, I did that. When I moved to Seattle, it snowed. When I moved to Austin, it snowed. There's a biblical freeze in Austin.
Yeah.
Happened. But
I remember that.
It's crazy. So my wife kind of looked at me one day and she's like, you're in the office or you're on a plane every week.
Yeah.
But we moved to Seattle and I'm the one who has to live in Seattle. So when you're ready, can we just go live in places that we want to live in, and then you can get on the plane and go to work?
Yeah.
And I love that. I wanted to build my life around that. With the fund, we have 300 LPs who are all executives and software companies. A lot of our fund sourcing actually comes through them.
Yeah.
So if I have Lars Nilsson, who's the VP inside sales at Snowflake, we get a ton of deal flow from the Snowflake ecosystem because of him. If I have Dennis Leandros, CRO Procore,
right,
we get a bunch of stuff from that ecosystem because of him. Same thing with OpenAI and the AI ecosystem. So it's less necessary for me to have to live in San Francisco or New York or wherever and just get on a plane to those places when we go. I ended up selling the house in Scottsdale, and we're going to do more of a nature-based place to live.
Live in a treehouse.
Yeah, well, maybe a treehouse, yeah. But we also I don't know. I was into a lot of things, cars, all that kind of stuff. We sold those and just...
You're asset light, Max.
Asset light. Keep it light, wandering, just and doing a lot of it just for the lifestyle.
That's awesome.
So
now that you're reconnecting with the go-to-market core, which is pretty much anybody who's somebody in go-to-market in the US, how are those people being deployed in this new AI world? Where are they going? How are they doing? Who is going where? What's the gossip?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is it'll be interesting to see what happens with college degrees. For the last 20 years, our Got Milk campaign was go to college, you'll be safe. And now people are going to college and they're graduating with marketing communications degrees, and AI is
hiring them.
Yeah, AI is taking out the junior component of that.
Yeah.
So where are they going to go to cut their teeth?
Yeah.
And there's just a lot less roles that are needed now than ever before. And even in the sales process, so much more of the job AI can do. In SMB, I'm not necessarily sure you're going to need a rep, anymore in that segment. Enterprise, you definitely still do, but AI continues to take on more and more of the responsibility, so you need less reps than ever before. And this was kind of our dream and our mantra at Outreach, which was, if you can get 20% more capacity out of your sales force, if that's the baseline number that we can get from our base, you just need to hire 20% less reps to get the same number of productivity.
Right.
And it's also the funny thing that actually ends up hurting a company like Outreach in the long run if they pay per seat prices
Yep.
because you make the organization more efficient, and then they need less seats.
100%.
So they should be paying outcome-based pricing.
100%.
And it just didn't exist in the capacity, like paid and the ability to do this in the past, where now it does.
Yeah.
So it's like a funny transition, obviously, to the topic of the podcast, but like our past and our future as outreach and paid have collided in a massive way. And we'll start to see that across a ton of other companies. It wasn't just outreach that was in this predicament. I think in the case of most seat-based SaaS companies, if you're paying per seat, but you're optimizing a workflow, they actually need to hire less people. And so, those two things are conflicting.
I know. I did know what's really interesting is that, and this is the first time I'm actually saying this publicly, is that the true genesis of paid was this one call with Alan, the CEO of DocuSign, where he asked me, Manny, you are in the thick of AI in sales. How many fewer reps do I need to hit the same number next year? And I'm looking at this thing, and this is a contraction event, like in the front of me, right? If I continue to be in seats.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, nothing ended up happening because DocuSign is growing, it's doing well, et cetera, et cetera. So, they can continue to grow the headcount. But to me, like that question was a very insightful, valid question that Alan, who is a futurist, was asking just 2 years ahead of his time.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was not hard from that point on to forecast forward, to say, like, as AI only has one way, which is it gets better.
Yeah.
How are we going to monetize? And when I started asking around, like, what are the tools doing? You can only attach things to seats, which made no sense. So, like, what is going to happen to the entirety of the billions of dollars we're invested in SaaS over the past 10 years, even 15 years?
There'll be a flight to quality. So that's the first thing. And I think you're already seeing that, like, from an investment standpoint, where, this is a completely different, tangent here, but like companies are raising one and done or 2 rounds and done. And then maybe later, much later, there's like this big growth round.
Yeah.
But that's because there's this flight to quality happening where the companies that are showing up and proving it on the field, and revenue growth is happening accordingly. But, it's going to be really tough. In 2022, we finally had this big culling of software where over the years, leading up to 2021, people were in seats, they were buying, whatever it was, right? It's like, whether it's HR tech, Slack bots to see how happy what people were in the company, and those were on seats, or whether it was outreach or something else. And then there was this big wave of layoffs where it's like, well, I actually don't need this many people, so I don't need this many seats.
Yeah.
And then it was also like, well, what is actually performing for us if we were to measure it based off the metric of, like, is this working?
Yeah.
And then a bunch of other things were cut because it wasn't.
Right.
And so, like, do those companies really ever come back unless they move to outcome-based pricing?
Yeah.
And if they moved to outcome-based pricing, then maybe they would have, the product would have stayed at the company. Like, they wouldn't have cut it completely.
Right.
But they would have known exactly, like, what they're getting for it.
Yeah.
And if it was worth it or not, versus just like, there's a $100K contract. Are we getting value out of this? No. Okay, let's cut this $100K contract. Versus it being maybe more moderately sized, appropriate to the value that they were receiving in the business. And then it's like, okay, cool. Well, we're paying $25K for this, but I can see on the metrics here that I'm tracking, like, we're actually getting X amount of value for it. That makes total sense. Okay, let's keep this product.
Yeah.
So maybe revenues come down, but it's more balanced, and customers end up being more happy, and they can be shown the exact value that they're getting from the business.
So will everybody reset? Because, like, you're arguing for everybody bring down their seat count.
Well, the resetting already happened. I mean, the resetting started in 2022, and I think people are starting to add again.
Yeah.
But we're always going to go through these kind of ebbs and flows. But yeah, ultimately, I think, like, to run an efficient business, you have to be tight on those types of things. And venture capital, the abundance of venture capital, allowed us to be less disciplined in a lot of different ways on that, right? Because it's like, let's just throw a bunch of cash at this. It doesn't really matter if we're getting every little last ounce of it out of it, right? And then you're in this, like, other funny predicament or dynamic that's happening here where it's like, why do we have such complex laws? Because lawmakers make them. Who are lawmakers? Lawyers. If we have these complicated,
it's like a self-serve
rules and regulations, then you need to pay lawyers
right
to go help people figure out how to get around them or through them or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in that we're seeing in SaaS to some degree. It's like, I always get asked, is AI going to take the jobs of sellers? And it's like, well, it will when it takes the job of buyers.
Mm.
And the people who have the jobs of buyers don't want AI to take their jobs.
Right.
So like there's always going to be this element of humans on both sides of it because
100%.
they don't want to lose their jobs to AI, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's really hard to implement it if the implementer is worried that the thing they implement is going to end up making them obsolete.
So how does that translate into your investment thesis? So what are you investing? Where you stop investing? So what are you saying? Just no, I'm not going to talk to you.
We're not doing a ton in GTM software. I want to see the space play out a little bit more. I think we're in like a very cloudy, soupy layer of it right now. We're almost like this massive in-between phase. And so the legacy stuff, even the things that have come up in the last, 7 or 8 years, I think they're having a tougher time growing. Even with them implementing AI, I think there'll be like a couple winners there that break through. But for the amount of, we were very naive to think that there would be a time where the public markets or M&A would have appetite for Clary, Outreach, Sales Loft, Seismic, Showpad, Highspot, Gong, whatever, like at over $1 billion each.
Just pile them up.
Right? So like how many of these raised at over $1 billion valuation? We thought there was going to be some sort of market that was going to accept that many companies.
How does somebody get that exuberant? Like, is it irrationality or was it just like deserved? Like what got everyone there?
Incentives, right? Like people got to put money to work. There's 3 companies in this space that are doing really well. Let's plow the money into these companies and bid.
Yeah.
And I think like everybody was feeling that for a little while. I remember holding Outreach stock at a $4.5 billion valuation and looking at my peers at other companies who were IPOing, and on their IPO day, they were doubling in value. Remember that? Like,
did I remember when ZoomInfo went public? It was just like
they were valued at $28 billion. Now they're valued at $2.8 billion. But like, the public markets were like, the irrationality flowed through. And so, as a shareholder, even, a couple layers down, you were always just like, okay, well, if we get in now, it's just going to be 2 or 3. Like, it wasn't like this business should be valued at this. It was more like, if we value it here and we get in here, we know that it's going to be worth double or triple just because like that's where the valuations are going. But it wasn't based on like, any rational thinking. So,
all right. So no go-to-market. What else?
Well, yeah. So like go-to-market's out. HR tech is another one that,
Why HR tech? Like HR tech is.
What do you think Lattice is worth right now? No offense to like all those people, but like it's certainly not worth $3 billion. There's a lot of companies in that space that have raised the crazy valuations that are probably.
But what about the agent equivalent of it? Like people who are doing what they were supposed to be doing, but on the agent.
Well, yeah. On the flip side of it, you have like, I don't know if it's HR tech as much as it is like, it's HR CFO, but like Rippling Deal, all that kind of stuff. Those companies are booming, but again, like they're compound startups, so they're doing everything. So there's certainly AI elements to these things, but I still think we're in like a more of a cost cutting phase of the cycle. And so like, DEI software is a great example of things that were getting a ton of funding in 2021 that are not getting a ton of funding now. Whatever your stereotype
is that a change in the sentiment with with a new administration, or is it like a truly like secular thing that is like
even before I would say this? So I don't know if the new administration has anything to do with it, because like that was already going downhill in 23 and 24. And it certainly doesn't help that we're certainly going this direction. Like whatever your stance is on DEI, I think we maybe over-rotated to a certain degree, and it's like, okay, there's a balance that can be struck here.
Right.
It's still very important to organizations, but
but we
think there are a lot
of tool for that, if you will.
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of HR. Like, I think a lot of CEOs are looking at things, they're looking at budgets and saying like, well, we're spending $500,000 or whatever it is on software dedicated to this. Like, shouldn't this be ingrained in our values for our business and we just operate as such? So like, we don't need a bunch of these things. I think that's just an example in the HR tech space that has obviously seen a lot of like cost reduction. But I do think and this would be an unpopular sentiment, but it's true. So like, deal with it. We were hiring out of our minds, and it was an employees market in 2021.
I remember.
And you can get a job and 2 days later get recruited for $200K more or whatever it is, and it's crazy equity, and like, it was insane. And so as a company, you had to go and make sure like you did all the stuff, bend over backwards for your employees. Otherwise, like, you couldn't hire these people. And I think we got back to like more of a merit-based and like
So we got back, or
Or-
did it get worse? Like I feel
No,
like it got worse.
You
Like,
think it got worse? I think there's.
no, I think it got overcorrected a little bit. Where like
It certainly got
there
overcorrected,
is no entry level jobs anymore.
but it got corrected. Like,
It got corrected for sure, but I think it like is swinging on.
well, in 2022, they started cutting jobs.
Yeah. Dude, like
And so-
Microsoft does a layoff every year.
Yeah.
And nobody calls them out anymore.
But it went from an employee's market to an employer's market.
Yeah.
It went from being like, I can get any job I want. What do I need you for? To, oh my God, I'm so lucky to have a job right now.
Right.
And so when that happens, the companies are less incentivized to go bend over backwards for every little thing for the employees. It's kind of like, hey, you're lucky to have a
Yeah.
paycheck coming in right now. So like whatever we do, we do. Now, I don't think companies went to that level. Like
Yeah.
they weren't. I don't think people are being assholes about it. Like I think there's companies are still doing tons of employee perks and health benefits and all those types of things because there is still competition for the the best people. But I do think it rotated in a way where like, okay, we got carried away.
Yeah.
And then maybe we even over-rotated in the opposite direction. And that's how these things usually balance. It's like you go crazy here, and then it goes crazy back here.
Yeah.
And then we kind of balance out,
Yeah.
which,
All right. So what are you investing in right now? Like what are the hot areas? Like if somebody 4 pitches come in right now, you
vertical is a big space for us.
Mm.
We just see a ton of opportunity there. I mean, there's a lot of industries that have been untouched by technology, even through like the SaaS era, that are now starting to get, shown their light, and they're massive industries. Petrochemical, gas, nuclear, things like that, really haven't had much innovation in a very long time. Farming, like I don't know, working at Outreach, even before that, but like we have 6,000 customers. I don't really remember anything in like the farming agri-tech space as a customer.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing some incredible things, and like farming's massive, massive industry, so much money flowing around there. And they've all like typically been scared to spend money on software, spend money on more things because margins are fairly thin. But like you can expand margins, make their lives easier, make their world safer, all those types of things, like then it gets really interesting and they'll spend money. So, we're in a company called CISO Labor that's like they're automating H-2A visas for farmers, and companies crushing, like a lot of those types of companies.
Even now with ICE and everything, it's still crushing.
Yeah, even now. I mean, we'll see. It's almost like too early to tell on ICE or tariffs and stuff like that in certain industries. I think it's easy to tell if they're having like a tailwind effect. Sometimes it's harder. Sometimes the headwind effect actually happens like a couple quarters out.
Interesting.
But yeah,
And they have a rush to it because like this picking season may be coming up. So
but that's the thing. They're automating H-2A visas, so they're actually like they should have a tailwind because they're helping people do it legally,
100%,
versus illegally, right?
100%.
And it's not like my personal view on what's right and wrong there, but like that's what the companies do. So ultimately, when we invest, is we're looking. The space is probably the most important. We're looking for a space. I think the surfer analogy is most appropriate. I think it's Mike Volpe from one of Index or one of the I word funds. But he said there's the wave, the surfer, and the board.
Yeah.
And the wave is, the industry with the tailwind behind it that has some sort of inflection point going for it. The surfer is the founder, and then the board is the product.
Yeah.
And the board, you're going to pivot that a million ways, that's not as important. The founder, exceptional founder, extremely important. But if you put an exceptional surfer in, a lake, then it can't surf anything, right? So like put an exceptional surfer on a 10-foot wave, then you're cooking, right? So the tailwind, the space is the most important thing by far. And it's one of the things that we had the conversation originally about, you even starting another company, we had to make sure it was future-proof.
Yeah.
This is going to have a sustained tailwind behind it
for
a very long time, because you're an exceptional entrepreneur. We've worked together for a very long time. But if you're in a space that isn't moving, like you just, you can't pull that,
What was the latest investment you made that you were super excited about?
Our last investment was a company called Orion, and it's fixing air traffic control and ground traffic control technology.
You joking?
And so we're
that Raj's mom works in air traffic control.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Well, Raj, she might be out of a job. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Good time for that, Kokomo.
No, actually, she'll be. I was just joking with him, but no. I mean, honestly, she'll be she'll now have complementary technology that should help her with her job and be more successful in her
Dude,
job.
like the whole Newark situation, like that probably beat up the round quite a bit.
Yeah,
As they're coming out to market.
so we were like the first one on the block. Again, like
Yeah.
got it through one of our GTM leader LPs, and we were able to get to it first. We led the round. So now we're, when we started the fund, we were doing kind of complimentary checks, but still, 500K plus. Now we're right
You're
at
leading.
leading. We're leading and co-leading. So we've always tried to be the second largest check, but now we're doing a couple where we're the largest or tied for the largest. So this was a lead check for us. Founder played professional lacrosse while working at tech companies. Just absolute dog, love it.
Wow.
And
I
he's got
didn't know professional lacrosse existed.
yeah, exactly.
Learned that.
I mean, it's
That's
a little
lacrosse
under
is
the
something
radar
that ended
sport.
college in the East Coast, and that's sort of like
Lacrosse is one of those sports where like you just get exceptional people that come out of them because like one, the only good schools that have lacrosse players are like the only schools that have they're the top schools.
Yeah.
And they're the competitive lacrosse schools. And so, and like, they're not the types of schools, and lacrosse is not the type of thing where maybe like basketball or football, it's like it could be a crappy school and like you don't really need to get good grades and you can keep playing, and they have like unspoken bond that it's like, okay, just stay here for a year. I'm going to pay $8 million on nil or under the radar and like then go to the NBA, but we're going to make a ton of money for it, right? Like lacrosse isn't like that. Your grades have to stay high. You go to a great school. There's prestige around that.
Still have to perform.
And you still have to perform, right?
Yeah.
And then, it's just, it's a game in Northeast that like I grew up playing, so resonated with that. But, Dog is a founder, and then the space has, massive tailwind behind it based on, what we're seeing right now. And there's been really no technology created there for a very long time that's, enabled them to do better work. So I think like Raj's mom on your team is really going to find something like this, supportive to her role in air traffic control. But yeah, we're excited about that one. But that's another example of like good vertical software that has space that hasn't been touched in a really long time. And I like hard. Hard is a moat. We're going to have to work with government agencies. We're going to have to work with regulations. We're going like, if they are successful, there are going to be big hard changes that they're going to have to overcome, and that is a bit of a moat for us.
Yeah.
And so I like those types of companies. It's got a very kind of like might be a slow start, but then it's one of those types of things.
So I was just walking here with a VC from a very prominent VC, like on my walk to work this morning, and I asked him like, how does this play out? Like the foundation models, are playing hardball with the developer experiences, with the with the cursors of the world, and now building a foundational model is not as hard as you thought. So who's going to win? Is the application layer? Is the application layer, defensible? Is the foundational layer defensible? Is the infrastructure layer defensible? Like, where is the defense here? Or is it just all execution?
It's all execution, and execution is both, I think taste, speed, expertise, experience. Like,
So what were the things that you said? Well, you said you need a hacker,
hustler, and a hipster. Is a good way of doing it. I think, I mean, like, that's why you have taste, you have the expertise, you have somebody who can sell. I think the hipsters is the taste, right? The hustlers, someone who could sell, and then somebody who could build fast. I think a lot of the stuff you're seeing right now, like the cursors of the world, everything else, they help speed.
Yeah.
Like you can build amazing stuff a lot faster. I don't buy the whole build DocuSign in 2 days stuff, but I do think like if you started outreach today, you could probably get to where outreach got in 5 years in like 2.5 years. And you could do it, spending less money.
Yeah.
But the whole DocuSign a day thing, like there's just so much nuance behind a lot of these softwares. Like you want to build outreach tomorrow and you're going to be one of these kids who goes and, sends a viral tweet out that says like, I built outreach in a week. It's like, okay, you built like a batch email sender with like an API to a dialer, but you didn't build like, governance,
CRM saying is governance,
security, all that kind of stuff.
Like, make sure you don't burn people's inboxes.
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah.
Go sell this to CBRE when they tell you that we need a software where our own reps can't see our other reps' instances because they will literally poach business from each other. Like you're in the same company. What does it even mean?
Yeah.
But that's governance.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's there's so much in that. Same thing with DocuSign. It's like, okay, cool. You built something that could sign a document between like two parties. Like I can also do that with a PDF viewer and an email, but like, sure, but you don't use DocuSign for that. Use DocuSign so it holds up in court.
Yeah.
So there's like digital fingerprint, all these other things that go along with that,
Yeah.
right? So like, I think, the Cursors and the Replets and all these other ones of the world are super impactful, and they're going to allow us to move faster than ever before. But like, I don't think they necessarily, it's not as extreme as you would see in some viral tweet somewhere. It's like, I built DocuSign in a day, and they're necessary. It's great. It's incredible what we're building.
So what are you advising? So back to the SaaS world, like what are you advising the CROs who are still in SaaS right now? Because like those are all your LPs. Like
Yeah.
what are you advising, like CROs, CMOs, either in the field or retire? What are you advising them to do in the next 5 years? Is it go get another job, or like turn this into an agent company, or like or retire?
Lean heavily into what's happening in AI. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And, start to, if I were one of them, I would do like a long weekend vacation without the wife or kids and just say like, I need to go hunker down and like literally learn everything there is possible to learn about what the best are doing right now. And you're seeing like there's the rise of the growth engineer. There's, some of the work that ZoomInfo, Outreach, and Clay are doing to implement AI into their offerings and, create micro campaigns, things like that are performing. But there's so much more at your fingertips than ever before that is changing the game in a material way. And I'll give you one example of this. This is a company we incubated called Operator. And our goal for Operator is to flip the sales process of the last 10 years completely on its head. So I wrote a book called Hacking Sales in 2015. We implemented a lot of this stuff at Outreach, but like the previous sales process that has been successful for a very long time was, all right, you get 10 or 20 customers.
Right.
And then you figure out your ICP based off those 10 or 20 customers. So you have a common denominator across those customers. So you say, our ICP is customers that use Salesforce, use Gmail, less than 500 employees, tech companies.
Yeah.
Those are like the lowest hanging fruit for us. Then you kind of create a target account list, and you arbitrarily pick 10 or 20 companies in that ICP. You say, all right, these are the ones we have like closest connectivity with or something like that. We'll go after these companies. And then again, so you go from like a guess to another guess. Then we're going to send them emails or make phone calls to them and kind of a guess again what's important to them that connects them to like the problem we're solving, right? And that they have hopefully that problem too because they look like some of our customers. And then like that's the start of your sales process, right? That gets the whole thing going. And in the age of AI, you can actually now like query and parse the entire internet for your value prop.
Yep.
And if you're really good at prompt writing, you can figure out everybody who's voiced that problem that you solve. And so reversing it, you can actually go to the research layer and say, hey, here are all the companies that are out there that are having the problem that we solve. Now that informs the messaging that we send to them. Then that informs the customers that we reach out to. That informs what our ICP is. Like it almost works completely backwards. And so I think if like, whether you're using Operator or not, the key thing is, and honestly, what a lot of these kind of what like GPT wrappers are, is they're essentially ways to help you write better prompts.
Right.
So most like most CROs, sales reps, anybody in any space doesn't really know how to get the most out of these LLMs.
Yeah.
If they write a prompt, it's going to be pretty basic. They're going to get some basic response back.
Right.
But like if you create a tool like Operator for sales executives, leadership, whatnot, sales teams, you can actually take their value prop, which is like a very dumbed down sentence, and you refine that as a prompt, and that returns all the results that you need to get an outcome out of it.
So last question on this, because it's really interesting that you're seeing the future of go-to-market. You're also seeing a ton of agentic companies being born, and they're all applying the principle of like, let's keep it small, let's not burn a ton of cash, and let's, nail the ICP, nail the value prop and go. How do you build a sales team in this new day and age? Like it's not go hire the guy who's been there, done that, the gal who's been there, done that, and then they just fill the room with reps, and then half of them will succeed. What's a new playbook?
Certainly quality over quantity, that's for sure. I mean, if I were doing it today, I'd probably go poach a bunch of my best reps that were like absolute killers at outreach and wherever else in my network, and not get too many of them. I just get the best ones, and then support them with probably a growth engineer and the products that they need to succeed. I might do outreach and clay, an operator, and then have the growth engineer kind of work the prompts and the lists so that we're able to create these micro campaigns that are super.
So are they still outbounding, or they're not outbounding anymore? Like, well,
Oh yeah, they'd be outbound, certainly outbounding. I think outbound hasn't gone anywhere. I think like what you need to do is work around the systems that are provided to you and leverage the research layer in a very meaningful way so that you're not dependent on the things that I would say are like everyone has access to now.
Yeah.
That was the thing about like 2015, 2016, 2017. I wrote about all these like signals you can get. So in 2015 or whenever I wrote the book, I wrote about, if you want to reach out to a company, low-hanging fruit, perfect thing to do is the company raises a Series B, you find the VP of sales, you say, hey, congratulations on the Series B. Seems like you guys are going in this direction now as a company. Here's how we can support companies like that, et cetera. Would love to talk.
Yeah, you were the first one on the trick, and then everybody run with it.
But it worked when only 2 emails came into that VP of sales that said, hey, congrats on the Series B.
100%.
Now, when it's built into every data provider, they get 600 emails when they raise a Series B, they mute all of them.
Yeah.
And so like, I guess it's one of those things where it's like, if it's a great signal, but if everyone's doing the same thing with that signal, then they're not going to be successful.
Right.
So you have to figure out how you're going to create these campaigns, leveraging the signals that exist. But like, it goes back to my moat before. Hard is a moat. Like, it was hard for me to go uncover who raised the round and do the work.
Yeah.
Now that is like one click in a Zoom Info or 6 Sense or something like that, like you as a sales team has to figure out how you leverage everything around that to go make that work for you. So yeah, there's like, obviously, one of the things that I lean into a lot is like warm introductions, referrals, things like that. I think the podcast play that we did at Outreach is timeless. Like, what are other ways you could build relationships with your customers? That, they come in, you put them on a pedestal, you put them on a podcast, you build a relationship, then you launch into kind of like, hey, well, by the way, we should get in a sales process. I think, you're starting to see a little bit of a resurgence with events, especially high quality events. Like we kind of overdid that for a while, then COVID hit, then everything went online, then we came out of that, then we kind of went straight back to overdoing it. Now things have like kind of rebalanced. But I think people like community, they like high quality experiences. They like, you almost as a vendor getting out of the way and allowing them to be just connecting with their peers. And if they make a great relationship or connection out of that, it's attributable to you as the vendor, right? But I think you can go fast and far with community. So there's kind of funny enough, like the old and the very new, and almost the stuff in the middle doesn't really work anymore. So it's like,
so you would say go find the strategies from like 15 years ago and reapply those, because nobody's doing that.
Exactly.
So like do events,
that's like
create community. Because remember, the communities was big, and then it's like fizzled out because there was like community platforms and all this other stuff that just like made it like.
Now, communities are stronger than ever. We had 125 of our LPs together in New York last week, and like I couldn't even count how many folks came up to us and said like, this community is like the best thing that ever happened. Like, this is amazing. Yeah, like that's why there's the quote I hear so much is like, even if I don't make any money off my investment in the fund, like, I'm so happy I did this because of like all the events and the community and the networking and just like the contacts that I made and like how close knit it is. And, we've kind of had like a little bit of a Dunbar's number thing happening at all of our events where it's always like less than 150 people. And so like everybody gets to meet everybody.
Yeah.
And even the community as a whole is always like artificially small and high quality because our ticket size is so high. Like, it's an investment, yes, but it's still, you have to come out of pocket for, 50 or 100 grand. Versus, other communities where it's like, oh, it's $1,000 or it's $2,000 and the company will pay for it.
Right.
It's like, no, you personally have to come out of your pocket for this amount of money. So it means you have to have been successful in your career.
Right.
You also have to be an accredited investor or a qualified purchaser. And like, you kind of have to like want to do it once you're in it, because you're like not going to get no value out of it where like you pay for it, sign up, and then like don't engage.
Right.
So there's something about that too. Now, obviously, our goal first and foremost is to make people money, but like that's pretty cool. They're like
Yeah.
super engaging. I think there are other great communities. Again, this is like a post ZERP thing, but like Exit 5, David Gerhardt's community, Pavilion, Sam Jacobs' community, like running Sales Hacker for as long as I did, we could never figure out a paid community. And then all of a sudden, ZERP flipped it on its head. It's like companies were willing to pay the ticket price.
Right.
People were like, okay, I need to have a community outside of my job.
Yeah.
Because like, what if I lose my job? Or,
So should all AI agent companies build communities, or is that going to be overplayed? Like, what's a smart way to do this? Or is it just audience? You know, because there is audience of like people who like listen to your message and like they are cool. Community is engaging between, you know, the people who are doing
I think every company should have their own, kind of community or community that they tap into. I mean, it was, I think your brand and what you represent and like events that you put on, podcasts that you do, all those types of things, like that builds community, whether you have an actual
Got it.
community that you like spin up,
Yeah.
or it's just like everybody wants to do the paid stuff. Like you've got your listeners, you got people who come to your events and stuff like that. Like I actually don't know if it's as necessary to have like a separate Slack or circle or whatever where you like house that community.
Right.
I think it's just more important that like you've got a great brand, got a great reputation, you've got followers and audience, all that kind of stuff, because that coalesce, that becomes your community.
100%. All right, so let's talk about some of the recent news. So Duolingo said they're gonna go AI first, which means that all the translators and all the people who are involved are no longer there. We saw Klarna, go one way and then the other. Like, what's the impact for people especially in Duolingo, right, where they, people feel in love with the fact that there's other people behind it, and now there won't be. What's the effect of that?
I did the smartest thing, then the dumbest thing, then the smartest thing again. Last January, Duolingo had some like obscure announcement that they were gonna like remove a lot of their translators as humans and turn into AI.
Yeah.
And their earnings call was like 2 weeks later, and so I was like, oh, I'm just gonna buy the stock now and sell it after earnings. It had like 25% pop. It was great. I did, and then it just like kept going up. So I like buy back into it later, and so I should have just held it.
Yeah.
They just kept crushing. But yeah, you're seeing more and more that like for some companies, it's just like, duh, like it's a no brainer, right? Of course they're going to, like, why would they need human translators so that if AI can do the job? And then I think there are others like Klarna where like, oh, we're removing all of our support people. It's like, well, like that's a massive maybe overreaction, like, or maybe you should roll that process out a little slowly and understand like what you can do with AI and what you can. And like, even if like for operator and other startups, I'm like, okay, well, is the role of support maybe moved to like a support engineer or support ops person, and that person triages like what AI can do, and then turns into a knowledge base so it becomes part of the FAQ. What AI can, do enough to a point where like you only need a little bit of time from a technical team, and what AI can't do at all, and a technical team has to actually do it. But if you could do it that way and you leverage AI the right way, you can probably eliminate a decent amount of your support reps. And you can probably figure that over time exactly how much without causing customer interruption.
Right.
Whereas like I think there are some just, big grand statements that look good for, investors.
Yeah.
Right? Like even the Klarna statement is like, on the one hand, as a institutional or retail investor, I'm like, I want to buy Klarna stock. This is great. The company's gonna be way more profitable now. It's fantastic. They won't skip a beat. I believe in AI. I've been fed all this stuff, how AI is going to save everything. As a customer, I'm not really sure that I want to hear that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, in some cases, like it would be nice to get my questions answered like so quickly and like perfectly.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, like, wait, what about the things where I actually do need to speak to a human? Now I'm going to be like in this weird, like, sorry, you can't speak to a human.
Because they're all gone.
And I'm pissed as a customer. Like, I don't want that. I don't want my SaaS software to act like, this like consumer thing. Like, they're different experiences. I'm spending $100,000 with you for SaaS software versus like $15 on an Uber ride.
Right.
Those are two different customer support experiences.
Right. The expectation is different too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a nuanced thing. I think there are some no-brainers where it's like, of course, you should replace all those employees with.
So what are you hearing from other investors? So like you co-invest in a lot of rounds. Like what it's getting them excited and what is not as exciting anymore.
I think a lot of people are thinking, I'd say, along similar lines. Like Andreessen has American dynamism, like we probably call it like global infrastructure, but it's all very similar stuff. We don't do things that like you would consider like war focus. Like
Yeah.
we don't invest in bombs or anything like that. But like I think what is happening in like space, military and defense, nuclear, some of these spaces like really interesting and exciting.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure where all that goes from like a world peace
Yeah.
standpoint. I hope it goes in the right direction, but phenomenally exciting spaces. There's even this Starlink ecosystem, like 70% of the world's, Earth's surface or more does not have access to Wi-Fi.
Right.
Even, and I think from like a number of humans, it's still like 3 billion people or something like that don't have access to Wi-Fi. So when you have a satellite, or a network of satellites in the sky where like everyone now has access to Wi-Fi, like what possibilities does that open up for the world?
Right.
That's incredible. And like it allows.
Oh, interesting. So whether you invest in a world that has
Yeah,
Wi-Fi across the world.
exactly. So like one company that we're an investor in called Armada Systems, we were in their first round. They just raised at $1 billion value.
I remember them.
But they do containerized data centers. So you can put a data center on an oil rig in the middle of the ocean, or a data center on like an army base in the middle of nowhere, and you've got data processing in real time right there. Instead of like in the past, they would have to like fly out like literally put a hard drive on a helicopter and like fly it to the mainland, process the information, send it back.
Right.
Like if you had some sort of issue happening on an oil rig in that amount of time, the oil rig can explode.
Yeah.
Like cost tens of billions of dollars and like
To clean up. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So like it's crazy stuff like that.
Right.
And then even more in what it enables for like, rural village in Africa now can get the same education as somebody going to Harvard. Like, the Goodwill Hunting Lions like paid $150,000 in tuition for what you could have got for $1.50 in late fees at the public library. You could get that now. You could get that online, at Udemy or wherever else. Like you could learn to code from anywhere if you have internet access.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's those types of things are more exciting than ever before. I think obviously everybody's investing in some area of AI. I think the big money's chasing like the winner of the OpenAI, Anthropic, like foundational layer type stuff.
Yeah.
Like what's going to be the AWS, GCP, Azure of that.
Yeah.
I think the small money is like we can't afford, like seed investors can't afford to play in that area, and like those battles are very far along.
Yeah.
And so like trying to fund the next one of those is really tough, but certainly on the application layer and dev tooling and things like that, a lot of investment there. And then I think everybody's excited about vertical, and you're just seeing a lot of these companies.
Yeah. No, I think vertical is actually the safest place to deploy money, because they're all all rich pockets.
Yeah.
And they're all being disrupted.
Yeah, we have a ton of companies in vertical that are just like out of the gate rocket ships, and there'll be competition in those spaces, but I think they'll have like really good outcomes.
Yeah.
And then we've got a bunch of companies that are like the Orions of the world, which are like they're going to be harder to get going, but when they do get going, it's going to be a rocket ship, and they'll have way less competition.
Yeah. One of the things I always wonder, and I was talking to this VC when we came here, is that is it easier to find somebody who knows the industry inside out and then pair him with a whatever developer that can buy code the solution, or for a great developer that went to YC to go find the industry expert that they need to get them propelled? So for instance, we had Jim Cotillia, who was Alpha 7X. They are assembling mortgages, right? So they take the mortgage from like the couple shows up at the house, they take their information, and then like all of a sudden, by the end of their agent being done with what they're doing, they have an investable mortgage security that they created, right? They issued, and a normal mortgage is $7,000, like, or maybe more, and they can do it for like maybe $1,000 or $2,000. And the interesting thing is that he's selling like hotcakes, right? And he's selling to banks who are creating these mortgages. He's selling his agents, but he knows when he looks at a Wells Fargo building in downtown, whatever their base, right, New York or Charlotte. He knows that in the floor 27th, when you make a right, the guy who does mortgage issuance is right there, and he can make a decision on the tooling or not. You know what I mean? Because he's been there. He's been in mortgages for 30 years. So why is the kid coming out that wants to disrupt the industry? He knows he's rich. He knows it's $15 trillion, right? And he has the right technology. Is it easier for him to go find the Jim Cotillo that is going to tell him that, in the downtown building in Charlotte, in Bank of America on the 27th floor, you make a right and that's the guy that you need to talk to? Like, which one is harder?
The answer is boring because it's incredibly nuanced. There's no silver bullet here whatsoever. Paul, my partner, surfaced a podcast where the guy was saying, like, the hardest thing to do right now is to hire really good AI engineers. And so, like, I'd rather back an AI engineer that doesn't know a space and then, like, let them figure out how to network into that space than the opposite. We've seen success in the opposite of that. Like,
Right.
we've seen success in both.
Like, I actually see success on the opposite side. Like, I like the best one is somebody who's been in the industry who can code. Like Deepti, boom. You see what I mean? Like, she came from Sansara, knows the industry cold. She can go do it again.
I don't think there's like one right answer. I think you can have somebody at a YC who's successful in a space that gets the expertise, from, as advisors, things like that are hired. And I think the opposite can be true. I think, it's our job as VCs to pattern match. That's what we talk about all the time. It's like, we want to do all this pattern matching. But ultimately, like, it's our job to be very good judges of people. And so, like, you can only pattern match so much. At the end of the day, it's, do I like this space? Okay, I found a space that has white space. I like the space. It's on fire. Let me go find an exceptional entrepreneur to go solve this problem. And I think if you're like almost too boxed in, you might miss the right person.
Yeah. All right, Max, to close, so good to see you. Thank you for coming out. I am so glad that your recovering went well. You look amazing.
Thank you, sir.
You look a lot better than when I saw you a couple of months ago. So this is a marked improvement. If you have doctor recommendations for those out there who want to get buff real quick, now is the time.
Yeah. DM me for all the supplement peptide. I got you.
Yeah. Awesome. Good to see you, brother.
You too.